What's up, y'all? Back with another video here. I'm actually getting ready to start a new series on my channel that has to do with personality typing, because that's something that I'm interested in. Have been studying depth psychology or union analytical psychology for 5-6 years now. Something I've grown to really appreciate, and it's something that I think has been a major part of my life in many ways, but mostly as it relates to growth, my own personal growth and understanding other people, as well as myself. So my personality type is the ISTP, stands for introverted, sensing, thinking, perceiving. Those letters don't really mean anything in and of themselves necessarily. It's really the cognitive functions that those letters code for. So basically the 4 letters that you get when you take the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator test. It's basically a code that tells you ultimately what your cognitive function stack is. And it's up to you to then do the research past that point, or after you've taken the test, to determine what those functions are and learn about how they, what they all mean and how they sort of interact with one another and how you yourself utilize them. Where your blind spots are, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, where your fears are, where your happiness will be derived from, who you're compatible with, etc. So, my personality type, like I said, is the ISTP, and I wanted to really discuss in this video sort of the, in general, how it feels to be an ISTP, sort of like a day in the life, I guess, like what goes on in our heads, what do we like to do, what kind of struggles do we have, what are we interested in, that kind of thing. Because you'll go on, these sites, like go type in ISTP into Google, you'll typically get a pretty generic, archetypical description of what an ISTP entails. And they're mostly accurate for the most part, but it doesn't really tell you the whole story. There's a lot that goes into personality typing other than just the letters and just these sort of stereotypes that are purported on these different platforms and different websites. So this video is going to be sort of a deep dive into sort of my life experience, what it's like to be an ISTP essentially. So to be an ISTP is to be somebody who is extremely interested in and extremely passionate about understanding the world around them, both in a sensory and theoretical way. I spend a lot of time sort of in my head contemplating the bigger questions in life, like why does this happen? Why are people this way? How does this thing work? That's basically the biggest question I ask myself. How does something work? Whenever I'm interested in something or someone, I'm basically using my mind to break down that person or thing into its different component parts, from which I learn how each part basically works in context with the whole. That's basically how I approach everything in life. And that's why I become what some people would call like obsessive with what I'm interested in. Any sort of hobby or interest that I have, I sort of like incessantly pursue more and more knowledge and more depth into that subject. Now, later on in my channel, I'm going to sort of discuss more in detail the cognitive functions that make up my stack, as well as perhaps I'll even deep dive into some other types as well in their cognitive stacks. But for now, I guess will focus on is my main function, which is introverted thinking. And I suppose we'll touch on my last function in my ego as well, because it's important, just as important. So my first function, or my most dominant function, is what's called introverted thinking. Sorry, it's a plane going by. So it's what's called introverted thinking, right? Introverted thinking is all about accuracy, precision. It's all about understanding the truth and being 100% objectively correct. Even though introverted thinking is technically a subjective function, because it's based off of what the user, he himself thinks, or her herself thinks is true, but it's typically based on profound logical processes going on internally that you've developed over the course of time because of the depth that you've taken to understand something for its individual component parts. So by the time introverted thinking has figured out something, that's why we sort of, as ISTPs, we actually kind of get the reputation for being very stubborn, very like some people would even consider us to be know-it-alls, or whatever the case is, just because when we feel like we know something, even though most of the time we are correct, you know, well, let me put it this way. When we feel like we know something, we are very much attached to what we already believe to be true, because we've already done a lot of work, sometimes days, sometimes months of research, and for ISTPs, testing in reality, in order to confirm what we think we know. Okay, so there's not very much you can tell us in the moment unless you have significant evidence to back up what you're saying, to very methodically break down with objective facts or experience to challenge what we already believe to be true. There's no way you're going to just come at an ISTP with an opinion on something and try to argue with him or her about something they already know to be true. Like, you're just going to have a really hard time. And from the ISTP's perspective, it's very frustrating, because it almost feels like they aren't appreciated for the work they've done to understand something so well. And the whole reason as to why we work so hard to ultimately understand things in the way in which we do is for other people to then take that information and make better, decisions, and basically make a better life for themselves. But most of the time, ISTPs find that others don't really value they don't really value their truth, right? Even if it's something that will be really important, which it typically is. But that's something, as an ISTP, is one of the biggest frustrations, I would say. It's just people don't really care about half of what you're talking about, just simply because most people kind of just live life in the matrix. And whatever is, just kind of go with the flow, basically. Don't really think about things too much, A case in point, for instance, my other playlist is on the carnivore diet, right? I mean, how many people do you know that's on the carnivore diet? Probably nobody. So that goes to show just how independent of a thinker introverted thinking as a primary function will make you. You will do things that are completely against what everyone else believes to be in line with the truth. So, yeah, that's sort of an idea of one of the biggest things that we deal with. And so on the flip side of that, our last function is extroverted feeling, right? So that's where our weakness is. It's where my biggest struggle with the world revolves around. It revolves around this function called FE, or extroverted feeling, which is basically empathy, basically understanding and valuing the feelings of those around you. And yeah, that's a sense of insecurity for us, because we don't really like to go there. We really appreciate the ability to look at things from an objective standpoint, and then draw conclusions, and then make strong, substantial, logical frameworks to establish principles that help us to move forward in a more informed and educated manner. We don't really like to let emotions, we don't really like to allow feelings and opinions and biases to muddy the waters of that logical framework and of those principles, because that goes against everything that we are as dominant introverted thinkers. ISTPs, INTPs will both relate to this, as well as ESTPs and ENTPs, because they have introverted thinking as their second function. So it's a lot of the times just as strong. Ours is more so ours is more primary though. We do it more often. That's what we do, like on autopilot, so to speak. It's just constantly thinking, constantly synthesizing and processing data. Introverted thinking is sort of like almost like I guess you can even compare it to a calculator. Like, it's basically you put in input into that calculator, and then it gives you out, based off of what you put into the calculator, it spits out the truth, or the answer, right? It synthesizes the data, puts 2 and 2 together, and gives you the result. That's all that TI is. TI is all about accuracy. But the problem is with us is that sometimes, especially younger ISTPs or unhealthy versions of an ISTP, we're sort of susceptible to echo chambers and susceptible to drawing a lot of assumptions based off of last known input. And so this is something that I've had to learn how to, I just have to be really aware of, because that's something that I have been known to do, but not often, because usually I catch myself farther down the path of learning something. Like, say I'm interested in a topic and I may believe something to be true in the beginning, but because of my constant pursuit to learning more about that subject, I typically at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, I figure out what I missed, like what I got wrong. But not all the time does that happen, I would imagine, for ISTPs in general, and they'll just end up being ignorant because of their own stubbornness, basically, in echo chamber susceptibility. So that's one thing that we have to watch out for. But other than that, typically, most of the time I've found that I do know what I'm talking about, even though I doubt myself a lot, which is why I do such in-depth research whenever I'm learning about something, because I do want to be correct. I want to be the most accurate that I can possibly be. So by the time I'm satisfied, yes, I'm probably right, which is very, some people will say that, oh, you're arrogant to even assume you know anything, or all this stuff, right? But the thing about especially ISTPs is we have extroverted sensing as our parent function, which means that we're very also like in tune with the world around us and the reality around us. And we're always processing that with our TI, such that, and then it also, the way that second function also makes us very hands-on and very likely to try to apply what we've learned or apply our principles to real life situations. And so we always test things. Like for instance, the carnivore diet, right? I test that on myself before I claim to know anything about it. I test it first. Okay, so I test it and I find, oh, it works, right? I've cured this, I've cured that. Also, I understand the science behind it very well. It all makes sense to me in my TI, so that checks out. Also, these other people that I've seen on YouTube or on forums who've also done the same thing, that have had consistent results. So like all of these things together put me in a position to where if anybody tries to come at me and tell me that, oh, you're wrong, or because of this, yeah, you've really got a lot of work ahead of you, because chances are you haven't outworked me in researching this topic. So the best thing you can do with an ISTP as somebody who's a non-ISTP, especially lower introverted thinking users, I find have kind of a big problem with this. Like ISFJs, INFJs, ENFJs, ESFJs. It's like they typically want to be listened to themselves. They want their logic and their principles and their conclusions to be listened to. But the reality is that most of the time they're half-baked. They're not well thought out most of the time, because that's just not their strength. It's a background function. That's like me claiming to be as socially aware and socially perceptive as an ENFJ or an INFJ. Like that's arrogant to assume, right? No. So that's kind of how you have to approach it as a lower introverted thinking user. It's like it works as a function, but it's not something that is nearly as strong as somebody who has it as a dominant function. And so you need to respect that and actually open your ears and listen, and open your mind to the idea that you may be in fact missing something. And as the dominant TI user, the advice I have for other ISTPs or INTPs is to also listen and give other people, especially other TI users, their time in court. Allow them to to talk through their perspective. Don't cut them off. Don't because I know it's like hearing nails on the chalkboard. Basically, as an ISTP, I can attest to that, like the nails on the chalkboard sort of feeling that you get, because you have somebody kind of talking about things that they don't really truly understand completely, and you're just like wanting them to stop talking like now, and you want to just correct them like now so that we can be over and done with it. I don't have to listen to, you don't have to listen to just this false assumptions and all this other stuff, so, and inaccuracies. But we can't do that. That's what alienates people the most in our life, I would say. I'm in a relationship with an ISFJ actually, and so that's probably one of our biggest issues, is that she feels like her opinions don't matter. And that's not the case, but that's how she feels, because especially when it comes to topics that I may bring up to her, and she's like, well, that doesn't sound right, because she's an FE parent user, she's an ISFJ, she's very much in tune with what the social status quo is and what the social belief is, that she's very hesitant to be open-minded to something that maybe she's not familiar with. So I bring up things all the time that may go against her current belief system or current area of knowledge. And she's very hesitant, and she's very skeptical. She doesn't come at the conversation from the standpoint of curiosity, but more so skepticism, which I take, I shouldn't take it this way, but I do take it kind of personally sometimes, because I'm like, well, why not just hear me out, right? Like, but it's hot as heck outside, but yeah, that's basically sort of an overview. I mean, there's a lot more to it than just these things, but that's kind of like that's kind of like a good, I would say, overview of what it's like to be us, or at least how it's like to be me, because every ISTP is going to be different. Some of us are a little, like, we all vary, so, but a lot of things are going to be the same. But anyway, I'll be posting more videos on this channel, or for this playlist that have to do with personality typing. That's going to be something I will be talking about pretty often, seeing as it's a subject that I'm interested in and that I know a little bit about. So yeah, be on the lookout for that, but also check out my other playlist that I have on the carnivore diet. It's something that I feel like everybody should take a look at, just because it's something that it's one of the most important things in life is your health, right? So understanding your health, understanding how your body works, understanding what it needs, how we evolved as human beings to nourish ourselves, and how our physiology works. All of these things I will be going into detail on this channel. And so, yeah, I definitely recommend tuning into that. But anyway, this video's longer than I expected it to be. But anyway, like the video and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos. And I'll see you guys pretty soon. Peace.